Hey, everybody. Welcome to another exciting episode of Clinic Gym Radio. I am your host, Dr. Josh Satterley, and it is my pleasure, my honor, really, today to be talking to the basically the one man that every chiropractor is jealous of. Women want him, men want to be him, Dr. Gregg Friedman. Gregg, how are you, buddy?
I'm great, Josh. How are you?
I'm good. And Gregg, you're joining us from basically the Phoenix area, right?
That's correct.
Awesome. You like to stay warm and dry.
Much as I can.
Nice. Well, Gregg, you were one of the, I think we first actually met in person because you were one of the speakers at the original Forward Convention, which, anybody that's listening that went to that, it's like the people that say they saw Nirvana at a dive bar in Seattle,
Right.
We were there before it was cool.
That's right. That was awesome.
And you're kind of known as you have your clinical practice, and then you also do some documentation seminars, and have kind of made a practice of helping other chiros improve their documentation. Am I right?
Kind of a one-trick pony.
Oh no, you have many tricks. Many.
Many.
Well, then that makes me a lazy dog, and we'll do the dog and pony show.
There you go.
Yeah. Anyway, so Gregg, I know that you're not the first chiropractor in your family, and people sometimes like to hear a little history of the guest. So can you give us a little background in you and how you became a chiropractor and how you got into the documentation seminars?
Sure. Well, my father was a chiropractor for about 60 years. So I've been saying since I'm about 5 years old that I was going to be a chiropractor. And basically for most of my life, it was just because my father was, and I wanted to do that. And I never really swayed from that until my junior year in high school. And then my junior year in high school, I thought, okay, this is an important decision to make. Am I saying that for the right, just because of my father? Do I really want to be a chiropractor? So as fate would have it, I had an English class, and my English teacher in high school wanted us to do a research paper comparing two or more things. So I thought, okay, I'm going to compare careers. So by that time, I already figured out that I wanted to be either a chiropractor, a medical doctor, or an attorney. And if you can imagine, I'm not going to tell you what year this was, but it was many years ago, and I thought there were already too many attorneys. So that was out. So then it was between
little did you know,
chiropractic
the
and
greenhouse had not yet bloomed.
Right. So it was between chiropractic and medicine. So I researched it and I read a lot, and then I interviewed medical doctors and I interviewed chiropractors. And what struck me was this. And this is years before managed care. So this is when medicine was still pretty good. I interviewed medical doctors, and every one of them was totally burnt out, and they hated it. I mean, they liked the practice of medicine, but they're like, oh man, we're on call all the time, and patients calling us at 3:00 in the morning, and you can't really leave town and feel comfortable. It was awful. They hated it. I'm like, wow. Well, then I interviewed chiropractors, and it was like interviewing a room full of surfers. They were like, dude, it's so awesome. I love it. Patients are great. That was so fun. And it was really a very stark contrast. And I, by the end of that research paper, I'm like, okay, that's where I want to go. And I became a chiropractor, and I practiced full-time for years. But I will say this, I got tired. I love seeing patients, but I was tired of being in my office all day, every day. But I didn't know what else to do with that. So then it just became a fluky thing, and I ended up meeting some people, and I started in documentation back in the 90s, of all things, before anybody knew anything about it. And
were we required to document back then?
What's that?
Were we required to document notes back then?
We were, but nobody knew what to say.
Well, it's hard to chisel it out of stone at that point, dude.
Yeah.
I don't even know if paper and pen had come along.
Yeah. So I've been a public speaker for years. I'd competed in speaking competitions, but I never knew what to do with it in chiropractic. And then something happened, and I was able to do a chiropractic thing, and I loved it, and that changed the trajectory of my life. So I still see patients about 8 or 9 hours a week, just about 3 mornings a week for a few hours, just because I like seeing patients. But I travel between between 25 and 30 weekends a year with my
Ooh.
own seminars or conventions or things like that. And then I consult with chiropractors, attorneys, insurance companies, all that. So I really enjoy it.
Awesome, dude. I gotta say this. When you were describing the chiropractors, I was like, "Hey, dude, this is awesome, man." So I teach for a group, the SFMA, and it's taught to chiros and physical therapists, medical doctors. It's kind of non-denominational. And one of the other instructors and I used to play this game called PT or Chiro, because my friend was a PT, and we were just from what the person was wearing when they walk in, we would be like, PT, Chiro. So to your point, and it's not so much anymore because I see that a lot of physical therapists have kind of relaxed a little bit, but they used to be a little bit more stiff than the chiros, right? So it'd be like a woman who's in like track pants and a t-shirt with some sort of university logo on it and kind of shorter hair. I'm like, oh, that's a PT who did her early years as an ATC. Like that's how, trainers, I don't know what it is about college trainers. They all wear that track pant t-shirt combo like years after training. And then a dude would come walking up and like, it's like we're in Lake Tahoe in February and he rolls up in like board shorts, flip-flops,
Yeah.
has his like spring water in a glass jar or something, or definitely Chiro, like
Chiro.
guaranteed, right?
Yep.
And then one time we're playing this game and this guy comes up and he's like in slacks and a button-down shirt. And we're like looking at each other and my buddy goes, "Oh, he's a hospital-based clinical director." Yeah, it's like, yeah, nobody else would choose to wear that shit on a Sunday. So,
Right.
yeah. Anyways,
Yeah.
it was very obvious that the chiropractors in this course were the most relaxed and enjoying themselves the most.
We're very
So,
chill.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's so different. In PTs, you usually, I would say probably 90% of the PTs in the nation work for somebody, usually a large group,
Mm-hmm.
and 90% of the chiros basically are on their own, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. So we might dive down into some documentation questions here, but first, you competed as a public speaker?
I did.
Nice. What was the group that you would speak for or the subject or whatever? I mean, it's because this is the years before teaching, right?
Yeah. So I was in Toastmasters for about 20 years
Uh-huh.
and I competed in some Toastmasters competitions. And I was in the JCs, United States JCs. I was in the Arizona JCs and they had a speaking competition. And I won the Arizona state competition. And then I went to Tulsa, Oklahoma and competed nationally for that. So I used to do motivational and humorous speaking. So that kind of got me started with that.
And that's just for fun. No, there's no,
Yeah.
yeah. Wow, that's awesome. Funny that it worked out in your favor, huh?
How about that?
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that a lot of people could use the training. I know that I went through a speaking course as well, and it was probably the two most uncomfortable days of my life, or three most uncomfortable days of my life, but made a huge difference. So
Yeah.
I'd recommend it to anybody.
Me too.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk documentation, my man, because, I remember you talking about this years ago, and I'm like, oh man, come on, Friedman, like ease back a little bit. And then I made the mistake of reviewing a case. I think I scrubbed the names and sent you what it looked like. But if anybody can picture this, imagine a piece of computer paper with 37 visits described on a single sheet of paper. Now,
Yeah.
how would you describe 37 visits on a single sheet of paper? Each line has to have essentially your entire soap note, but written in one line. So, the pain findings, the subjective complaints of the patient, any orthopedic tests you want to do, any treatment rendered in the plan, and just repeat that on an entire sheet, one line after the other. And then all together, that was, supposed to be $3,900 worth of care or something like that.
That's right.
It's unbelievable.
Yep.
So when did you go from like, hey, I see a problem to, man, I got to do something about it. And I kind of like talking, so I'll help some people out.
So I really started in the 90s of all things before it was a thing. And back then I was really talking about, I did this in practice where I started measuring patients' range of motion, like with inclinometers. And it changed everything. Just doing that one thing, it changed everything. Now I remember back then I started doing outcome questionnaires too, but it was kind of a hassle. It just took It didn't take that long, but it took long enough to make it aggravating. And I quit doing it. But I measured range of motion with a computer system back then. And it changed how I communicated with patients. It changed my report of findings. It changed the how patients complied with my recommendations. It changed how I got reimbursed. I'm like, wow.
Just from the introduction of measuring range of motion.
Like that's interesting. So then I started teaching chiropractors for another company, a friend of mine had with that, just on the range of motion stuff like that. I did like a Thursday seminar for 6 hours for a while. And that's kind of where I started with that. And then things changed a bit, and it became maybe a little bit less involved with the range of motion stuff, but then the other stuff started coming up, whether it was Medicare, personal injury, things like that. And that's when it started to really expand. So I was doing seminars for others in the 90s and the early 2000s. And then I started on my own around 2006 or so doing that. And
I guess I want to know what, you saw success with measuring range of motion, but like, when did you put together an actual course and say, man, this is something I want to share?
Like my full course, probably around 2006.
Okay.
So I started putting it all together with not just range of motion, but certain things that we have to document and that we should document. And then I started traveling all over the country, and I wasn't sure if anybody was going to care about it. In fact, I'd like to go to Europe, and because I want my message to be global, I'm trying to raise the standard for the entire profession. That includes outside the United States. I'm just not sure, though, that they care outside the United States. I'm a little iffy on that. I'm not sure that a lot of chiropractors in the United States care, but
yeah. Well, let's talk about that pressure real quick, because I think that, when you're in school, you have no idea what's coming down the pike, right? I mean, they don't tell you what it's like, but when you work with insurance companies, because I've done some of that work, and I've done some work with attorneys and chiros and everybody, you kind of see these battles that ensue. And basically, I would relate it to this. If you're working for an insurance company, you're agreeing to play basketball. And if you agree to play basketball, both teams have to agree, hey, we're going to play this way. And, you sign a contract that says we're going to play games this way. You can't come in and then take a shot from the free throw line and tell them that it's worth 3 points.
Right.
You just can't do that. And people are like, yeah, but I can go out of bounds, but you can't. The insurance company's like, no, I'm not going to pay you if you keep running out of bounds, or if I'm not going to pay you for 3-point care from doing layups,
Now that's true, but I'll tell you this, and I want doctors to understand this. I don't want doctors getting stuck on the notion that documentation is only for insurance reimbursement, because it's not. It is now transcended all of that. In fact, documentation, look, the eyes of the world are finally upon us. We've been asking for this forever in our profession. We've been begging for it, and now they're watching for us. The way we document is how we show the world who we are as chiropractors and what we do and how effective we are or are not. And there is a golden opportunity here for us to show the world how good we are. And our documentation is so awful most of the times that it's killing us. And if we can change it and make it better, we can really change the whole narrative about our profession. However, we have to figure out a way to do this in the least amount of time, because how we are. Nobody wants to do this. Even me, I don't want to do. But if we could do it in very little time, it could actually work.
So don't send that 37 visits on one piece of paper to the local MD.
Don't send it to anybody. I don't want anybody ever seeing that, ever.
Yeah.
Burn it.
All right. So
tell them that there was a fire in your office and that all the records are burned.
What's funny? I have a friend who she's a forensic CPA, and they were suspected at a local city office. There was suspected fraud, that somebody was taking money and stuffing it down their pocket. And so they did all this research, and they narrowed it down to 3 people, and they basically changed the work schedule to find out on purpose. They said, hey, we're modifying work schedule. It was to isolate the incidents, right? And so the change is supposed to take effect Monday, and they're like, we'll have this wrapped up by Friday. this person is stealing so much that there's no way it's going to go a full week without us knowing, right?
Right.
So Monday night, somebody uses the key card to come into the office. There's crappy video, but you can't tell who it is. And when they leave, about 20 minutes later, an quote unquote accidental fire starts on the file cabinets. And they're like, the best part was they had no idea what the hell they were doing. And, it just really, this little thing just kind of smoked and didn't burn anything. And they're like, all right, well, then they get security footage of who was in the parking lot and whose key card it was. And they're like, oh, look at that. We didn't have to wait till Monday. She showed us on Sunday night.
That's great.
Yeah. So you got to watch out for those miraculous fires,
Got to watch out for that.
Yeah. Anyways, so documentation. So if we really want to impress the world and we really want to make ourselves better, and by the way, I think too, if you're working in an office with multiple providers, or you want to have a preceptor in your office, or what I suggest, which is, if you want to offer active care, I think that, having a highly trained CA that acts kind of like a personal trainer is a fantastic way. All those people need clear knowledge of what's going on in the situation rather than a 5-minute conversation about every single patient every time, right?
Right. There's no need to over document. And that's what some chiropractors are doing. They're saying too much. I'm like, just quiet. Don't talk. You're saying too much.
Interesting.
I want you to say less, but the less that I want you to say needs to be some specific items.
Yeah. Well, you mind sharing some of these nuggets with us about this? Because, just the fact of what would you say the top 3 things you tell them not to include when you're reducing the amount of documentation they have to do? What are the top 3 things they're including that don't really matter?
So one of the things that I see in so I review a lot of records for insurance companies too. And I really have no biases. I'm looking for very specific things, and they're either there or they're not. So some chiropractors, especially as more and more chiropractors are using software for this, these softwares are set up so that you are just saying a bunch of words that are literally meaningless. It's just ridiculous. So some of the things that we should not be talking about would be when a doctor is oversharing on that. Let's see, the subjective complaints, where I only care about like 3 things, basically, which, after we get through the history, there's only just a few things to document. Well, some of these doctors are documenting all these crappy things that are terrible. Now, we understand that Medicare really drives the train for this whole thing because everyone else follows Medicare. So if you do deal with insurance, you'll notice that a lot of insurance companies are requiring documentation that follows the Medicare guidelines with that. So if we learn how to deal with Medicare properly, we can make this work. And Medicare wants only 2 basic things from us. 2 basic things: pain and function. That's it. Pain and function. All the other insurers want the exact same thing: pain and function. PI, you want to do PI? What do you think they're looking for?
Hold on.
And function.
Oh,
yeah.
Man, I thought I was going to guess it. Dang.
Okay, wait, let me try this. Workers' comp. What are you looking for?
Hold on. Eye color, anxiety levels, and am I close?
Exactly. So what's happening is most chiropractors are missing these 2 things, and they're talking about all this other crap. And I'm like, but where's the 2 things? That's all I'm looking for.
Yeah.
So.
And pain can be described how? Like, what are you looking for there?
So Medicare wants us to do an assessment of pain. Now, here's the interesting thing from Medicare, because I helped a chiropractor with an audit appeal maybe a couple of months ago. And it went back a few years, and they were trying to get like $66,000 from this guy. And when I saw the report from the administrative law judge, the one thing that they got this guy on every single visit was they said he did not document a change in each condition since the previous visit. Number 2, he did not document treatment effectiveness. Well, I've been preaching this for years, so I know how to document that, and I do document that. But I thought about this. I'm like, how many chiropractors are actually doing that? In other words, if every chiropractor in the United States got audited by Medicare, would they pass those two things? And the answer is very few would pass that. So how do we do that? All right, so let's talk about the subjective part of our note. What are we looking for with that? So there's two ways to document pain. First of all, on the daily visit.
Now, before we dive into this, Greg, let me just make this point. Greg offers an entire day seminar that's wildly exciting. Plus, you get to spend time with him, which is,
2 days.
A lot of people, 2 days. Yeah. A lot of people pay for that just to spend time with him, but you could also come away with some knowledge, right?
Wait, I'm not getting paid for this today?
Yeah, man, the check's in the mail, buddy. But if people want to actually do the 2 days before you dive into this, or if they're like, man, this is awesome, how can they find your courses?
So my website is the name of my seminar is Got Documentation. Okay. So my website is gotdocumentation.com. So it's GOT, documentation.com.
Now, for those kids that grew up in the 90s, that used to be based upon the Got Milk commercial. But now people are going to be like, what does Greg have to do with Game of Thrones? I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Either way, Game of Thrones documentation, just GOT documentation.
There you go.
So let's dive back into this. So description for Medicare of pain.
Okay. So all we're looking for is, so the one thing that some doctors do now for pain is rating the intensity of pain, 0 to 10.
Okay.
Where 0 is no pain, 10 is the most pain imaginable. And I tell doctors, make this easy on your patient. Because a lot of doctors say, oh, my patients hate this. That's because you're giving them too many choices. For example, I hate eating dinner at Cheesecake Factory.
Oh, that was going to be my example too.
I hate it. And it's not because the food is bad. It's because their menu is so huge. It's so aggravating. It takes me like 20 minutes to get through the menu. And then I forgot.
It's frustrating because there's so much good stuff.
I hate it. Yeah, it drives me crazy. I just give me 5 options. And let me just choose. Well, anyway, that's what happens when you give them 0 to 10. Patients are like, so do this. So if 0 is no pain, 1 to a 3 is mild, 4 to a 7 is moderate, and 8 to a 10 is severe. So I just ask the patient, all right, so you have headaches. Are they mild, moderate, severe? Because they sort of understand that. They can't define it, but they sort of understand it. Are your headaches mild, moderate, or severe? Patient says, let's say moderate. And then I'll say, okay, moderate is between a 4 and a 7. So give me a number between 4 and a 7, and not 0 to 10, but between 4 and 7. Is it closer to mild, so it's a 4? Is it closer to severe, so it's a 7? Or is it more in the middle, like a 5 or a 6? And that's how we can kind of get them to a number much more easily. And then on the next visit, I can tell them, okay, your headaches last time were a 7 out of 10. Any difference today? And the patient can say, let's go down 1 number to a 6. Okay, that's all that has to be. Really easy. However, if you only do the pain intensity, it becomes very limiting because it's very possible that that patient's condition can get stuck at a 7 for a while. So now your records look like 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, and you're not telling us anything. Right. So one other thing that we can add to that for better context would be the percentage of time that they're feeling the intensity for that condition, the percentage of time. So what some softwares are doing, though, which is not helping, is giving you a range of occasional, intermittent, frequent, and constant. That might be okay if you're seeing the patient once every 6 to 8 weeks or so, like a medical doctor may. But for us, when we're seeing the patient pretty regularly, that gives us nothing. So instead, what I recommend is document the percentage of time in actual numbers, not 22%, but maybe 5 or 10% increments. So, 75% of the time, 50%, 25% of the time, 100% of the time. So that way, even if the pain intensity is stuck at a 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, the frequency might be going from 100% down to 95%, down to 90%. And that gives us, now we can see, all right, the intensity isn't changing, but the frequency is improving, and that's still showing improvement. So that's something, and those two things can be, so it's the same thing. Every visit, I can look at the patient and say, all right, your headaches were 90% of the time when I saw you 2 days ago. Any change since then? Yeah, it's not as constant, so maybe 95%, maybe 90%. All right, so That's it. But now we can show the changing of the metrics, and now I can actually use technology to calculate for me in every visit. All right, so the pain intensity went from a 7 to a 6. That's a 14% improvement. The
Yeah.
pain frequency went from 70 to 60%. That's a 14, whatever percent improvement that is. Now we're able to show the change. And then the third part of subjective would be the use of outcome questionnaires. And I've been preaching this for decades.
I want to pause real quick because I just want to illustrate something about the pain. Like I said, I've done some record reviews, and I think everybody should go into their software and find that button that is, if you walk through, like I was walking through Parker's seminar. It was funny to me. There's 4 or 5 documentation softwares in the building, right? And 3 of them all talked about how fast you can do a note. Like that's their pitch, right? Is, oh yeah, you can do documentation 5 seconds. Watch this. And one of them had a salt button, the same as last treatment.
Yep.
And you click that and click done, and it takes everything, right? So when I've done these reviews, I'm like, so you're telling me that, Mr. Johnson here was 7 out of 10 for 30 straight days. Then there was a re-exam. Then he was 5 out of 10 for 30 straight days. Then you did a re-exam and there's no pain. That's not how pain acts. And
Hallmark miracle.
Yeah, I always call it the Christmas miracle. Like he woke up on Christmas Day and all his pain had gone away. Yeah. The other thing is, I think if you want to show the severity of an injury, hey, it's a 7, it jumped to an 8. Then it got it back down to a 7, a 6, then it jumped to an 8. Like that's what happens in major injuries is you get those flare-ups. It's not a perfect linear progression.
Sure.
Or they do a 4-phase, 4-phase recipe treatment plan, and starts in an 8. After re-exam 2 or after re-exam 1, it goes to 6 out of 10. Then after the second re-exam goes to 4 out of 10, and then it goes to 2 out of 10. But it's like this perfect stair step fashion. Right. You're like, that's not how human beings respond to care, at least that I've seen.
I mean, it can, but it's not likely. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you're not doing because if I send you notes, I'm like, Greg, this person moved to Phoenix, and you look and you say, all right, well, it was a 8 out of 10, then a 7, then a 6, then a 9, then a 7, then a 6, then an 8, then a 5, then a 4. That gives you a little bit of information going, this thing may have some instability. I probably want to re-examine. Like, the pain moves around a lot. I don't want, you might be wondering how that person responds to care or what seems to flare them up. And it gives you more information than just this linear number. Anyways, that's my little diatribe, but
yeah, no, I agree.
Go ahead.
So the third thing would be the outcome questionnaires, and this is where function comes in. Mm-hmm. So certain outcome questionnaires are pain only, which we don't need to do because we've already documented the intensity and the frequency. So I tell doctors, look for the functional outcome questionnaires, but look for the ones that are quick and easy to do. Don't load up your patients on these, huge questionnaires that aren't necessary. So, for example, I love the Bournemouth questionnaires for back and neck. I like them better than Oswestry and the NDI for the neck, which are 10 questions. 7 questions is 30% shorter than 10 questions. It's faster. It's easier. So I just get
like 7-minute abs. I mean, everybody's heard of 8-minute abs. Yeah.
Does that not work? Anyway, there's a questionnaire for headaches. That's a little bit longer, about 26 questions, but it's beautiful for how it helps determine, it asks questions like, do the headaches affect your ability to read or to socialize with family and friends and things like that? We could track those scores. So the pain intensity and frequency should be documented every visit. Outcome questionnaires, according to Medicare, should be done every 30 days or sooner. And the or sooner is very important to understand, or sooner, because what I tell doctors is, go with the or sooner. Do it every 2 weeks for the outcome questionnaires. Why 2 weeks? Because there are other guidelines that are being used against you that have been around started with the Mercy guidelines, but they're also used by ODG and CCGPP and workers' comp guidelines in multiple states that says if the patient does not show signs of objective improvement in any 2 successive 2-week periods, referral is indicated. Now, they don't mean objective the way we usually think of objective. What they really mean is measurable and functional. So think of it this way. If a patient does not show signs of measurable or functional improvement, then in 2 successive 2-week periods, referral is indicated. Well, that means that if you do a trial of care. So to establish your measurable functional baselines, do a trial of care for 2 weeks. And then what do you do after 2 weeks? Reassess, redo those outcome questionnaires. If the outcome questionnaires show measurable functional improvement, but it's not yet normal and not yet plateaued, are you justified to continue treating that patient? Yes. For how long? 2 weeks. Go another 2. Just think about 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks. If you think to yourself, oh, Greg, I don't want to do this every 2 weeks, even though it only takes a minute, well, I'll just do it every 30 days. Okay, do it every 30 days. But I'm warning you, if after 30 days, they do not show measurable functional improvement, I'll cut you off. No more treatment. And you'll say, why? Because isn't 30 days equivalent of 2 consecutive 2-week trials? You have one shot at this. If you do this every 2 weeks, you now have the flexibility to look and see, oh, wow, we didn't really get anywhere in this last trial. I need to change something about the treatment, change a technique, an exercise, a modality, whatever it is, and go for another 2-week trial. Keep going until you find that, because they may do fine for a while with one particular methodology, and then they hit a wall. Change something, do something else. And that's the whole key. And that gets us very, very patient-centered with this, and we're able to track it. So when I review records, I can be brutal, because the first thing I look for are the symptoms, and I'm looking to determine one thing. Are the symptoms radicular or not radicular? That's it. That's it. Only 2 things, radicular or non-radicular. And they're almost always non-radicular in the cases that I see. Second thing that I look for is, did you establish measurable functional baselines at the beginning of care, like with outcome questionnaires? The answer is no for 99.9% of all cases I review. The answer is no. Now, if they didn't do it at the beginning of care, are they going to do it again at 2 or 4 weeks? No, but I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to look at your records at about the 4-week mark to see, did you do any questionnaires there? And the answer is no. So now you've got no functional measurable improvement after 4 weeks of care. I cut you off. And the tragedy is, this patient probably needed more care, and this patient would have benefited from more care. But that's not my job here. My job is to see, did you justify that care? And that's why. So how do you get past me for that? Show me measurable functional improvement. And that's the key. Medicare requires that we show the effectiveness of our treatment. We've got to be able to document, is our treatment even helping this patient? And it's not just those pain intensity numbers. That only gets you to the next visit. The key to get beyond the 4-week mark are the functional measurements. That's the key.
Are you interested in becoming a better provider for musculoskeletal conditions? Well, if you know me, you might have seen me out on the road, but I totally believe in, I adore the SFMA, the Selective Functional Movement Assessment. It is a fantastic way of assessing the movement-based dysfunctions in your patients. Now, why movement? Because movement has to do with motor control, and that's usually the first sign that pain is going to develop. And it's a better, more reliable method than assessing pain. So if you're interested in using a movement-based diagnostic system as part of your intake protocol, I would highly recommend the SFMA. Plus, they've got the best instructors. I'm one of them. So I'll make it fun. I'm easy to listen to. And, well, I don't know about that, but I enjoy teaching it, and it's a fantastic course. I recommend it. So check out functionalmovement.com and look for an SFMA course near you. Functionalmovement.com. Look for an SFMA Level 1 coming to your area. Hope to see you there. So you're not saying to inundate our patients with an oswestry and an NDI and a headache questionnaire on day 1 and then never do it again, because you're going to end up with, you're not going to get paid for your care. The patient's going to hate it because they're filling out what feels like a phone book worth of information, right? And it's not getting you any open doors. So use these briefer functional questionnaires more frequently, but not to a point where it overwhelms you or the patient.
Right. So in your example, I would give the patient the headache questionnaire, and I would give them the neck Bournemouth questionnaire, and maybe the back Bournemouth questionnaire on the first visit.
Okay.
But I would explain to them why. I said, this is how we're going to determine if you're improving or not. And we're trying to keep, my goal is to get you better as fast as possible and as cost effectively as possible. And then so I said, we're going to track this, we're going to score these, and then I'm going to have you do these again after 2 weeks of treatment to see if we're on the right track or not.
I would, that might be worth some training with your front desk staff, or like you're saying, the conversation with them, because, if that person is in a significant amount of pain and they have headaches, it's hard to concentrate. They're, or it's after a traumatic injury, a car accident, or they fell or something like that. You know, probably filling out a ton of paperwork is pretty low on their list, which is why, by the way, I think in those cases, a little tip is have your front desk person fill out all the electronic stuff for them. If they just bring in filled out paperwork and hand it to you, like their name and all that stuff, please don't make them write their address 5 or 6 times. I want to go to all these offices, Greg, where they're like, fill out these and every one of them asks for your name, address. I'm like, do you guys, we're in the, digital age here. Like, how hard would it be for you to know that the one time I wrote it was correct? Like, this is not a crazy idea, right?
So what I recommend for the initial paperwork, don't have the patient come into your office and fill that out there. Mm-hmm. That is inefficient. It's a poor use of time. Instead, when they call to make their first appointment, have your staff ask them for their email address, or if they have internet access, go to your website and have the paperwork on the website, or email it to them and tell them, fill this out at home ahead of time, bring it in already completed to your visit. It'll save you a lot of time. Mm-hmm. It's much more efficient for the doctor and the staff also. So now they come in, you look at the paperwork, make sure they didn't skip anything. If they did, give it back to them. If everything is all filled out properly, now they're good. Now all they've got to do, once I know what their symptoms are, then I'm going to give them the appropriate outcome questionnaires to do. But they've already done the other stuff ahead of time, usually, which is a great way to do that. So don't load them up. But you're going to have to explain to the patient the why behind the outcome questionnaires, because if you or your staff have a bad attitude about it, like, oh yeah, sorry, but you got to do that. Forget it. They're going to pick up on that. So instead say, hey, this is exciting because this is how we are going to be able to best help you. We're going to track this and see, are you getting better or not? And I want to make sure that I'm doing as much as I can to help you.
Yeah, because I'm sure to them, it feels encumbering to the patient. They're like, why does Greg want this information? And I think that's an important point to realize. Greg doesn't necessarily want it or not want it, but that's not why you're doing it. You're trying to illustrate this case to somebody else to make sure that they get paid or their bills get paid, whatever, right? Like you're helping them present a better case to their insurance company as well.
I don't even care about the insurance at that point. I want to show the patient after 2 weeks of care that they had a 28% improvement in their function based on these questionnaires. I mean, that's my reported findings.
Man, I've been wrong 18 times in this interview so far. This is great. So you do have a lot of amazing information, Greg. And once again, people can find your courses at gotdocumentation.com, correct?
Right. That's right.
All right. So let me ask you this, Greg, because I see, I get some emails and stuff from folks that are running, the clinic gym hybrid model. So they got the clinic and the gym next door, and you're dealing with a very, how do I say this? So if we look at Medicare now, and Medicare starts, let's just say at 65 years old. I'm sure that you've seen, there are 65-year-olds out there who are living a life of what used to be a 45-year-old, right? They're running triathlons on the weekends. They're playing golf 2 or 3 times a week. And it doesn't fit into that quote unquote Medicare model perfectly. And then you have these other people that are decrepit and, you got to put a second chair in your office for the Grim Reaper to sit down with them. You're sure that 67 years old is as old as they're going to, their 67th birthday is the last one they're going to see. And it's such a variation. It seems to increase with time. I treated a guy the other day as an 81-year-old dude, and I could have easily convinced you he was early 60s and you would have believed me. Just the speed at which he spoke and how he moved and whatnot, and his range of motion was incredible, and just loving life. So when you get into this kind of clinic and gym model, you deal with some very functional people, and it's almost like they get, when you're doing some of these questionnaires and whatnot, they're so highly functional that it's hard to show any loss of that function, because essentially they're going from superhuman just down to human. And any tips there? Because I do get this question quite a bit.
So these are the people that their pain tolerance is pretty high.
And let's say that they're like a CrossFitter who works out aggressively for an hour to 2 every single day. If you shave 20% of that off, you know, I mean, they're used to being sore and uncomfortable. I mean, you've treated
Right.
professional athletes, right? Like they're never not tender and sore. That's just part of the job. But
Right.
tracking that properly oftentimes is hard.
Yeah. So this is where you want to measure stuff. So if they're an athlete, if they're like, I have a patient who's a Medicare patient, 65 years old, and he was doing triathlons. He's in great shape. And so I would have him I was treating him for a back issue, and I would do the intensity, frequency, and the outcome questionnaires, just one questionnaire, 7 questions, and we will track that. But if you're finding that these athletes or these high level functional people, when they do the questionnaire, everything's a 0. That ain't going to help you.
Right.
Help you. So what can you measure? Well, you know, range of motion measurements is the next metric that may or may not be relevant for the patient. And this is something I've been measuring range of motion for decades, probably more than anybody. And I'll tell you this, it isn't always great, because some patients will say, yeah, I don't feel like I'm moving very well. Or you'll even look at them and you'll think, wow, they look pretty stiff. Yet when you measure the quantity of their motion, it's normal.
Yeah. I had a girl, just as a woman, come in my office, and she said, my right hamstring is super tight. And I heard you're good at loosening things up. And I'm like, okay, let me see. So I'm thinking, all right, I got to lay down, do an SLR or something. In my office, Greg, she stands up, takes her left leg, flexes it all the way up, and puts it on her face and kisses it, basically. She takes her right leg and raises it all the way up, and it ends up about 3 inches in front of her face. So just picture this. It's basically straight up and down right in front of her. She's like, see, it's really tight. I'm like, I don't think there's anybody that would describe this tight. Well, she was a Cirque du Soleil performer. And for her, that's really tight, you know? And I'm like,
right.
So if I wrote in my notes, you know, left side 175 degrees of hip flexion, right side 170, that's going to be a tough one to pass off.
Well, but that's the kind of thing that I would measure. And I would say that I would, in context, explain that she's a Cirque du Soleil performer and she needs symmetry for that. So I would document that, but that's where you want to measure the function that they're having issues with. Like even golfers, you know, we get these golfers here in Arizona who, male golfers in particular, if they have a little discomfort, that usually isn't enough to get them into the office. What happens is when their drive average is now 30, when their drives are 30 yards short of their average, now they're pissed. And now they come in. And that is a metric that I said, okay, I want you to keep track of your drives now as we treat you, and let's see if that's improving or not. And that's a functional thing that's relatable to them that we can keep track of and see. The whole key to this, Josh, is that we've got to determine, we got to be able to show, is the patient improving with our care? Because as the guy that reviews these records, it looks like we're just treating these people for however long we can. And like you said earlier in this interview, you said that, you know, 777, all of a sudden it's a 2. Oh, they're all better now at the end of it. That's not how this goes usually. We need to see for each trial of care, are they improving or not, to justify more care. And instead of thinking about this as a drag and as a chore, let's think about it as, this is how we can show everyone how effective we are. That's the beauty of this whole thing.
Yeah. And I
So
think
the metrics I'm talking about, the ones relevant to chiropractors, excuse me, are the pain intensity, pain frequency, the outcome questionnaires, and maybe the range of motion measurements. But again, I'm not all that excited about measuring only the quantity of motion. I'm more interested in measuring the quality of the motion, and that could be a whole different story. Like even with FMS and SFMA type screening, I always tell doctors to do it. I'm like, I want to see you getting into the actual measuring of these things. I want to see what are normal measurements for age and gender populations, and what is this patient, so that we can determine and start tracking this metrically, because data is key. Even our researchers at Chiropractic, who are just wonderful, they're begging us, they're begging me, Greg, tell these doctors, we need more data, we need numbers, we need metrics with this. And I have friends and family in the medical field also, and it's the same story. The more data they can have, the more information the more they can help people. And that's the key. And I'm telling you, Josh, the eyes of the world are upon us. And I welcome it if we can show it. If we're going to keep documenting like crap, like we have for however many years now, it is not going to help us. In fact, right now we're waiting for Congress to hopefully pass this Medicare bill, and everyone's all excited about it. And then every now and then somebody will ask me, "Hey, Greg, what do you think about this Medicare bill?" And I'm like, "Well, it's a double-edged sword."
Mm-hmm.
Like, why? I said, on the one hand, I'm stoked about it. I mean, that in my state of Arizona, insurance reimbursement is like the worst in the country. It's just terrible here. Medicare, if Medicare would actually pay us for the other stuff, it'd be the best payer other than PI. And that would be the same in a lot of states. And there's 50 million people that are on Medicare, so with a very low copay.
And it's growing, right?
And it's every day it's growing like that.
Oh.
So that would be a good thing. The bad thing is, if we continue to document as poorly as we have, Medicare is going to take one look at that and say, you know what? We're done with you guys. We've given you opportunities. We've told you what is wrong. We've told you how to fix it, and you just blow us off every time. You're not worth our time anymore. And now we're all completely shut out. And some doctors watching this say, "Oh, just tell me how to get out of Medicare altogether." That's not where we want to be as a profession. That's 50 million people that we can benefit, that we can help and show how effective chiropractic is. We just need to know how to do it right and effectively and efficiently. And it's so easy to do that.
And, those people need care more than the 50 million 25-year-olds that we could find too. And it's amazing what chiropractic can do for them. And the risks are so low. Oh, God. Anyways, we go on and on. Hey, Greg, one last tip for measuring range of motion. You got any tips or tools that you would recommend people get? I know even iPhones now have, inclinometers and measuring devices that are hyper accurate. Somebody told me, a researcher at Belmont University said that the iPhone is accurate to their tests, say 0.5 degree to 1 degree is the amount of error. And a JTech is 2 degrees. So what you have in your iPhone is more accurate than a JTech, but it's not a dual inclinometer setup. It's just a single. But
right. So to measure the extremities, a goniometer is all you need. To measure the spine, at least currently, dual inclinometers are what we need. I use some other technology to actually look at the quality of motion and the quantity at the same time. So I'm measuring both. That is what gives me more information, because actually the quality of motion to me is more important. The quantity is only just a metric that I can track, but the quality is really telling me what's happening with the patient, what they're able to do, what they're not able to do. Are they getting a flexion relaxation response at the proper time, or is it not happening? So I like to track that as well. It's a very functional kind of a thing for that.
I'm learning from this. You properly overlay many ideas to get the picture of the patient, rather than, I think some people think, and I would be in this camp too, that certain things can live in isolation. And what I've heard from you is, don't just rely on a single factor, just like when you're doing an exam. Like one positive orthopedic test means almost nothing, right?
Right.
But 3 positive orthopedic tests that are all targeted on the facet, and, your complaints fit the facet pain, mediated pain, like all those things start putting together this picture. And what I'm hearing from you is you can do range of motion. Then if you do that in combination with, I'm just stabbing at this, but surface EMG, it's not one of those by itself. It's the combination of those things that's telling you how do those things work in conjunction with this patient. And then let's cross compare those to what the patient's complaining about or how they're describing the pain. And now we have a really good clinical picture.
Okay, so let me give you, that's exactly right. Let me give you a real life example of that. So this is talking about personal injury. So patients who've been in auto accidents, for example. Patient comes in with neck pain, and they always say this, neck pain that goes into my shoulders, right? So I always ask these patients, show me where in your shoulders, because I want to know, are they talking about their actual shoulder or more of the traps? Almost always they mean the traps, right? They'll say, it's going into my left trap and things like that. Okay. What we don't realize, or what I didn't realize for years, is when we think about radicular issues from the cervical spine, we're thinking about the dermatomes of C5, 6, 7, 8, T1. And I'm telling doctors now, start considering above C5. Because do you know what the dermatomal pattern is for C4? It's the traps. My point is, when you've got to pay, a lot of doctors, they don't, they had a patient, oh yeah, my patient has neck pain that goes in left trap, and they blow it off. And what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying is, that's pain in a dermatomal distribution.
Mm-hmm.
That could be radicular. So when I see that patient, I'm like, okay, this is possible radicular here. I'm looking at the C3, C4 level of the spine. That's what I'm thinking. The orthopedic test that I do, looking for radicular findings may be negative for that. That's okay. I'm going to now measure range of motion, both quantity and quality. If I see muscle guarding in certain positions there, now I start to think to myself, okay, what is the body guarding from? Why are the muscles guarding? What is the body trying to tell me? Well, the body is trying to protect that person from something. For example, if there's ligament damage or instability, wouldn't the body's natural response to be to protect that in some way by making the muscles tighten up and guard, trying to protect you with that? So I'm thinking, okay, so then I do x-rays. I do flexion extension x-rays, and I actually have them measured with that. And then I often, not always, but oftentimes will find, okay, there is some amount of ligament damage at C4, C3, C5, that general area. So now I'm thinking I've got muscle guarding, I've got pain in a dermatomal distribution, and I've got ligament damage all in the same area like that. And my next step is I send them for an MRI. I get an MRI back, and now it says I've got muscle guarding, ligament damage, pain in a dermatomal distribution, and a herniated disc at C4. Now it all starts to make sense to me.
Right.
And from a case point of view in the PI world, that just changed the entire complexity of this case. It changed it switched categories. It is a completely different animal now that I've got disc herniation with all this other information. And the problem is, in the PI world, chiropractors and even medical doctors, the exams that everyone's doing is literally 75% deficient. When a medical doctor performs an IME on a patient, that exam is 75% deficient. It's ridiculous. Wow. So we start looking at these different factors in there. It puts together a clinical picture that we now can start thinking about. How does this work? How do I best approach this with the patient? Am I showing improvement or not? If I am, great. If I'm not, maybe I need to co-manage with somebody else. That's how we can do this.
Awesome. Well, Gregg, I feel like you could just pile gold on us for an hour here. You're like Scrooge McDuck, where he's swimming around his gold coins, but it's all knowledge. So the fact that you've been in chiropractic for 142 years, is impressive. And I appreciate you sharing that with us.
My pleasure, Josh.
So, Gregg, one more time as we wrap this up, because I know that I don't want to hold back too much of your time, and I really appreciate what you shared. Where can people go to find you and your courses, and give them an idea what the courses are like? Because I like the uniqueness of your start time and end time, because it honors the fact that people are traveling to see you and whatnot.
Yeah. So again, the website is GOT Documentation. So it's think Game of Thrones. I'm going to use that now. GOTdocumentation.com. And as of right now, I have 3 more seminars for this year. I'll be in New York City this weekend.
As we record this, it's December 4th. So there are only 3 weekends left, my man.
Yeah. So I'll be in New York City this weekend, and then cool. Spokane, Washington. And I finish up
same place, really. Manhattan, Spokane.
Yeah, same.
You won't even be able to tell the difference.
Lexington, Kentucky, the weekend before Christmas, and then I'm done for a while. And then I'll have my 2020 schedule up on my website soon. My seminars are 2 days, Saturday and Sunday. So Saturday, we start at 1:00. So some doctors see patients on Saturday mornings. Some doctors are traveling in from other parts of the country.
So you complete your week, spend Friday night with your husband or wife, and then fly out Saturday morning.
So we do 1 to 7 on Saturday, then 8 to 2 on Sunday. And I take you through the whole process of what the requirements are, what the rules are, and then I dive into with you how we can actually do this really easily and really quickly and really cost effectively for that.
That's great.
And how we can actually show the world who we are as chiropractors, how effective we are at what we do.
Yeah. I went to a seminar, Gregg, one time, and the guy was like, yeah, that's why at the end of it, every daily note you produce is going to be 3 to 4 pages long. Just think how that'll look to the insurance company. I'm like, Well, you're not going to send them to medical doctors. That's for damn sure, because nobody's going to read through that crap.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that? 3 to 4 pages per daily chart. Anyways.
Yep.
And so you're doing for those folks that are listening from a very cold climate, you're typically the cold months of January and February, you do some warm weather seminars and whatnot, and you enjoy life, right?
Yeah, I always start my year in January in the Pacific Northwest because it's crappy weather, but not too crappy that I can't get there, like Seattle, Boise, Idaho, things like that. And then I might do Florida a few times the first quarter of the year to make it a little easier.
All right, Greg. Well, thank you so much for the time this morning, my man. For those of you listening in, we recorded this but early and I almost missed it because I almost overslept. But I'm talking to Greg, and as you know, many people have seen him. He's wrapped in a robe, and he even did his hair. Did you do it to the right or left? I can't tell with the way
it's parted down the middle this morning.
It is? Okay, yeah. I appreciate that. So on behalf of Dr. Gregg Friedman, this is Dr. Josh Satterley saying, go out there, maximize your license and live the life you dream of. Thanks a lot, Greg.
Thanks, my pleasure, Tom.
Thanks so much for checking out these videos. I hope they're useful. We'll cover things like rehab, exercise, business model, progressions, layout, everything else that helps you build a clinic. So if you're interested, you can click here, there, here, or anywhere to get more videos just like this. Thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you soon.